The UN chief says that at least 50 civilians have been killed in US-led airstrikes in Syria since September. Ban Ki-moon also warned that Islamic State terrorists have responded to the bombing by stepping up their own attacks on Syrian cities. Let's get some reaction now by speaking to British Member of Parliament Jeremy Corbyn, who's on the line. Jeremy, pleasure to speak to you. Now, Washington earlier said that civilian casualties were not a concern when involved in bombing a terrorist territory, which, personally, I have to admit, I find quite shocking. I'm sure anybody who values innocent human life would find it quite shocking. How does that align with international law?
Well, it's illegal in international law to deliberately target civilians during a war. Israel is under investigation for the bombing of civilian targets in Gaza, and if the US are deliberately bombing civilian targets in Syria, then that is also illegal under international law. But aside from the objectivity of international law, there's this sort of cold reality that somebody's saying, well, 50 civilians dead, we don't regret it. In fact, there's 865 been killed, apparently, and they're saying the other 815 are all fighters. Well, they're still human beings, they're still lives, there's still bitterness that's going to come as a result of that. Surely we need some sort of progress towards creating a scenario where there can be peace within Syria. It's regrettable that the Geneva II conference hasn't taken place, and we're now faced with this sort of 3- or 4-way civil war, depending on how many different protagonists you count. Valerie Amos's report to the UN Security Council a couple of days ago indicated that there are probably 12 million people in Syria living in desperate poverty. There are tens of thousands, nay, hundreds of thousands in refugee camps in Jordan, Lebanon and Turkey, and all over the world, particularly in Europe, but indeed in wider places than that. There are refugees from the civilian population in Syria arriving, trying to achieve a place of safety. There is a hunger strike going on outside the Greek parliament of Syrian refugees there. It's a desperate situation.
Now, as we know, Islamic State, they still have control of large parts of Iraq and Syria. Now, as we understand, the reports are they're making at least $1 million a day from selling oil on the black market. If the US wants to kind of cut off a lot of their power, surely they could do that by bombing the refineries and stopping their income.
Well, there could be a targeted action, as you indicated, which would deal with the outflow of oil, which is, of course, their main source of income. But I think we also need to look slightly more deeply also and say, well, ISIL didn't come from nowhere. It didn't all emerge in a few weeks. It's been growing for a very long time. It is very well armed, very well equipped, and very well financed. Well, somewhere along the line, that money is being transacted from the world's banks, in its general sense, from the world's arms industries, and many of that equipment, one suspects, may well have come from a combination of Gulf states and Saudi Arabia, who have been the world's biggest arms buyers, particularly from France, Britain and the USA in the past 20 years.
The Syrian government, they've been involved in this conflict. They bombarded the symbolic Islamic State capital, I think we can say, in Raqqa. At any point, do you think the US are going to say, we're fighting a common enemy here? Is there a chance they could actually become allies, even if for the shortest period of time?
The US are hardly going to admit that, but the reality is that they're apparently sharing information about what they're targeting, and I think there might well be an unspoken agreement that there will be a sort of pincer movement against ISIL by both the US forces and the Syrian government forces. But there has to be also, as you indicated earlier on, a concerted pressure on ISIL funding and sources of arms, because that is the key to it all. But there also has to be some sort of appeal to the population that are living in the ISIL areas, because if they're going to be bombed by Western bombs, if your family are killed by a bomb, they've been killed by a bomb. You are going to be angry, you're going to be bitter about it. So I am very concerned at this increase in US bombardment of Syria without, as I understand it, any legal basis for doing it other than the issues faced by ICL in Iraq. There has to be some more nuanced, more systematic political process in the whole area.
Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on RT to speak to us about this. We've been hearing the thoughts of British Labour MP Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you.